Did you know from The Phantom Menace, Jar Jar was originally green? Which is interesting, because Han Solo was originally green too. And, to make it one more, Greef Karga was originally green as well. A sandstorm destroyed most of the set of Mos Espa and Anakin Sebulba's pods. George was not concerned, however, as the same thing happened in the very first Star Wars, back in 1976. And he saw it more as just a sign that he was doing the right thing, that's what happens when he goes to Tatooine. Warwick Davis, who plays Wicket in Return of the Jedi, cameos as 3 people in this movie. Wald, Sebulba's friends who was gambling against Anakin in the pod race, and a Naboo native who helps in the parade. Coruscant is an imperial planet from Heir to the Empire. The capital of the Republic and Empire being a city planet was originally envisioned for Return of the Jedi and was named something else. Timothy Zahn most likely made this the capital after talking to George Lucas before he started writing the Thrawn trilogy. The same actor plays Ki-Adi-Mundi and Unray. Samuel Jackson asked to be in the Star Wars prequels while on an interview in a British talk show. He told George Lucas he was fine just being a stormtrooper and nobody would know he was in the movie, but instead George gave him the role of Mace Windu. George Lucas began writing The Phantom Menace in November 1994. The original title was The Beginning. The scene where Qui-Gon, Jar Jar, and Obi-Wan are in the bungo, Jar Jar says, "Crash at the boss's hay blibber," had Liam Neeson, Ewan McGregor, and Ahmed Best laughing every time after the take. He laughed so hard his mustache would fly off, and they'd have to re-glue it on to film the next take. Ewan McGregor's uncle is actually Dennis Lawson, who plays Wedge Antilles in the original trilogy. The cast had to refilm the scene where they realized the hyperdrive is leaking because after the visual effects came in, the acting did not match. E.T. makes a cameo. This is a callback to when E.T. walks by a kid in a Yoda costume. Bail Organa has a cut scene from The Phantom Menace where he's in the Senate chamber. If you look in the scene where Sebulba is about to turn Jar Jar into orange goo, you will see that Quinlan Vos behind them, undercover, on a mission. This is because George liked the extras design so much on set that he made him a character, a Jedi, and gave him a comic series. The Neomodian masks are actually a mix between a mask and animatronics that move the mouth by remote and control the eyes by remote control. The celebration theme at the end is actually Palpatine's Emperor theme, sped up and more bright and happy. R2-D2 being remote controlled caused many problems on set. It caused so much a headache that they ended up having 2 different teams, the ultimate R2-D2, the way they could continue filming because R2 was slowing production down. They had to speed the cameras up to keep up with Darth Maul and Obi-Wan battling each other. The pod race sequence is actually extended in the DVD, digital, and Blu-ray versions of The Phantom Menace, but in the original theatrical cut and in the VCR, the pod race is much shorter and characters like Deadbolt and other characters do not even appear in the race. George Lucas's accent strategy to make Star Wars feel more lived in is to have the actors say the name of the characters and the planets any way they interpret it when they read it. This is why everyone refers to Naboo as Naboo, and everyone refers to the Gungans as Gungans, but if you hear George Lucas talk, he calls it Naboo, planet Naboo, and he calls them the Gungans. George's original idea for the prequel trilogy was very similar to the original trilogy. He was going to direct episode 1, and he was going to have someone else direct 2 and 3. But it's easy to see he had so much fun directing the first one, he decided to direct the other 2 as well. George Lucas wrote a basic outline of 50 scenes for each movie in the prequel trilogy before writing The Phantom Menace, the way he knew exactly where the story was going to go, what was going to happen. Did you know for Attack of the Clones was the first film to ever film on digital, with George Lucas pushing hard to make this happen, as it cut down looking at dailies at the end of the night by 2 to 4 hours. The push was finally made for Attack of the Clones to actually be filmed digitally, whereas in Phantom Menace, they still had to film on regular film as the technology was not ready yet, and Phantom Menace was the first film to be projected on a digital screen. Samuel Jackson asked for a purple lightsaber, that way he would be able to find himself in the Battle of Geonosis arena. The shot where Yoda says, "Begun the Clone Wars has," became known as the Widowmaker for the visual effects artists at ILM, saying that was the most complicated and hardest shot to get right in all of Attack of the Clones, as to get the subtleties of the fact that Yoda was upset and contemplative all at the same time. Episode 2 began filming 3 years to the day Episode 1 began filming. George and Anthony Daniels were the only ones on set for the Lars homestead that were there back in 1976 for the first Star Wars. The crew had to rely on blueprints and George and Anthony's memories to recreate the set of the Lars homestead. On the first day, the power went out on the new cameras. The first scene filmed was actually cut from the movie and features Chancellor Palpatine announcing to the Senate there was an assassination attempt on Padme's life, which is interesting because the first scene filmed for Return of the Jedi was cut as well. Anthony Daniels, C-3PO, asked to be featured as a cameo in Attack of the Clones as this was his 5th Star Wars movie and he had not shown his face. When Ahmed Best, Jar Jar Binks, heard this, he asked for a cameo as well and they both raced to the extras' costumes to see if they could get a costume in time to be in the club scene. This is interesting because now Ahmed Best actually also plays Kelleran Beck, which makes you wonder, is Kelleran Beck undercover in this scene? In the casting search to find a young Boba Fett, Tamora Morrison was driving with casting director Robin Gurland very fast across the streets in New Zealand and was pulled over by a police officer. Tamora Morrison replied with, "It's your lucky day, officer. I have with me the casting director for Star Wars Episode 2. I can get you a role in Star Wars Episode 2. And much to his surprise, the police officer still gave him a ticket. Yoda vs. Dooku was the only battle scene in Attack of the Clones that only made 80% ILM's satisfaction, which is surprising because the scene looks amazing and still holds up incredibly today. Attack of the Clones is the longest Star Wars prequel. The DVD checkers, who check to make sure everything is right before a DVD is shipped out, called many times because with the scene with the seismic charges, they kept being concerned that the audio went out. Tamora Morrison has revealed the battle in the rain was very difficult in the Mandalorian armor, as the rain fogged up his helmet and it was hard for him to see while he was battling Obi-Wan Kenobi. ILM convinced George to create a CGI Yoda by animation director Rob Coleman, putting a CGI Yoda over key scenes in Empire Strikes Back to show how realistic they could get it. This finally convinced George that he could now use a CGI Yoda in Star Wars, and therefore he began to create a scene with a lightsaber fight. Elevator talk between Obi-Wan and Anakin was added in reshoots much later at another studio and was not originally in the film. The film filmed pickup shots at Elstree Studio, also known as George Lucas's lucky charm for the Star Wars film. The camera weighed 200 pounds. It being the first film to film on digital, the first digital camera weighed 200 pounds. It was very difficult to move. Therefore, there is not much camera movement in Attack of the Clones. John Knoll, visual effects supervisor for Attack of the Clones, decided to use a real model for the Geonosis arena. In doing so, to get all the shots needed, this required them to have day shifts and night shifts to get all the shots needed 24/7 for all of the Geonosis arena scenes. Not a single clone trooper suit was made, and all the clone trooper armor in Attack of the Clones is CGI. The very last shot filmed was a shot of Obi-Wan beginning the chase after Zam Wesell. Christopher Lee was in his 80s when he filmed Attack of the Clones. Yarael Puff was removed from Attack of the Clones because he was deemed too confusing because he looked too much like Kaminoans. The film finished its final cut April 10th and had a preview screening that day with the cast and crew. Did you know from Revenge of the Sith, Commander Cody is named after a character in a 1930s serial that George liked. Ewan and Hayden trained for 2 months straight, intensely, to prepare for the final battle on Mustafar. All 3 villains in the prequel trilogy represent different parts of Vader. Dooku represents the fallen Jedi, Maul represents the Sith assassin, and Grievous represents the cyborg. You can also see this with their costumes, where Dooku has the same type of cloak and cape as Vader does. Grievous looks a little bit similar to Vader's suit, and Darth Maul wears all black. George and Anthony Daniels were the only ones on set back in 1973 and 2003 on the blockade runner Tenta IV. General Grievous coughing, George Lucas recorded when he had bronchitis. Revenge of the Sith is the second biggest unaltered theatrical re-release in cinematic history. C-3PO has the last line in the prequel trilogy and the first line in the original trilogy. George Lucas cameos in the opera scene as Baron Papanoida. Anakin runs by him when he goes to see Palpatine. The last scene filmed was Anakin running to Palpatine's aid from Mace Windu. A young Han Solo originally appeared and helped Yoda on Kashyyyk, living with the Wookiees. This was cut because ultimately George felt it was connecting the dots too obviously. The Millennium Falcon can be seen flying in Coruscant in the background after they rescue the Palpatine. Fans voted on the color of Obi-Wan's new astromech in the film. Fans were treated to a daily Episode 3 journal log written on StarWars.com every single day Revenge of the Sith was filming. This log was recently re-released on StarWars.com to celebrate the 20th anniversary of Revenge of the Sith. Ian McDiarmid trained for only 3 hours to prepare for his battle against Mace Windu, as there was a miscommunication requiring more training than he was expecting because he thought there was going to be a lot of wide shots. Samuel Jackson accidentally whacked him many times with the lightsabers. Owen Lars was added into the ending using visual effects, as the actor was not available to be at Tunisia at the time. Quinlan Vos originally appeared in the Order 66 deleted scene and was set in an animatic and ready to go, but did not make the final cut. Steven Spielberg helped George come up with ideas for the final 2 lightsaber battles and Order 66. For the scenes where Anakin carries Obi-Wan on his shoulders, a realistic real-life-size dummy of Obi-Wan was made that we could carry around more easily on his shoulders. It took George 33 years to complete his Star Wars saga. Everything about Revenge of the Sith is designed to represent a tragic opera, including how the music is very chorus-like all the way until the end. George Lucas's son cameos as the young Jedi killed before Bail Organa at the Jedi Temple. Jeremy Bulloch plays Boba Fett in the original trilogy, cameos as a pilot aboard Bail Organa's ship. Part of the Mustafar is actually a real model created with lights and chemicals that looks like lava. George wrote many side adventures for R2-D2 in Revenge of the Sith. Many of these ideas did not quite fit the story and instead were used for Clone Wars episodes.